And we're live. Hello, everyone. Hello. This is early morning on Pacific Coast, and it's mid-morning on East Coast where I am, and hopefully afternoon in Europe. So for everyone who is watching us, maybe we have someone from India, maybe we have someone from Midwest. Everybody welcome. Thank you everyone for joining. This is Irene Lyakovetsky, and I'm hosting another FinOps event today. So while people are gathering, I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker today, because it's my pleasure to host Dieter Matzion. Dieter, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Pleasure is mine, and the pleasure is absolutely on everybody's behalf, on FinOps audience, because Dieter, you are a FinOps practitioner.
Yes,
You're an ambassador,
that's
and
true.
you are an author with O'Reilly Media Series. This is something. You are YouTube creator, Dieter, and this is all about FinOps discipline, adaption, and practical advices for larger community. Dieter, again, we're so privileged to have you on today. Why don't we get started?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Dieter. So FinOps, right? So many people already know about this discipline. Why the developers, why engineers or finance people should know about what FinOps is? Can you quickly summarize, and we dive into some practical points we announced today?
Yeah, absolutely. So not many people know, right? They think FinOps is financial operations. That's actually not correct. FinOps is a proper know of finance and DevOps, right? Stressing the communication and collaboration between business and engineering teams, right? FinOps is an evolving cloud financial management discipline and a cultural practice that enables organizations to get maximum business value by helping engineers, finance, technology, and business teams to collaborate on a data-driven spend decisions.
That's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. Let's dissect it. Yeah, let's dissect it, Dieter, because with your experience, you've been working with FinOps, discipline and tools on Netflix, Google. Correct me here on your background, Dieter, so we kind of
Absolutely.
raise your profile for our audience 1st.
Yeah, correctly. I have been doing, well, it was back then called Cloud Financial Management since 2013, right? At Google, Netflix, Intuit, and currently at Roku. So I started actually at Google, where they hired me to find inefficiencies in their internal cloud offerings, right? These inefficiencies can then be taken and moved into their public cloud offering. And so this is where I learned cloud from the ground up, right? How it works, how all the components are, how to take services and move them. That was necessary because Google back then was growing more than they anticipated, and building a data center, it takes about 2 years, right? So it's a long time before you have new capacity available. So they needed someone to find inefficiencies. And then when I moved to Netflix, I basically learned Amazon Web Services from the ground up, and I continued doing the same type of work.
Beautiful. Then you are just the right person to answer some of the practical questions. So let me speak to our audience for a moment. Again, thank you so very much for taking your time, maybe before your work day, maybe during your work day, maybe just after your work day. Absolutely. Please let us know where you're joining from, what kind of FinOps experience you have, if any. Okay, any questions for Dieter while we're speaking, because I'm sure some of the points will resonate with you. So let us know that you're interested in the topic and simply that it's resonating, what we're discussing here. So Dieter, back to you here. Yeah, FinOps, you mentioned your experience, okay? More and more I see jobs for FinOps practitioners out there. Can you maybe spill out what do people do when they have FinOps in their title?
So yeah, Cloud FinOps practitioners, it's actually fairly simple. We only have two levers that we can pull, right? We have rate optimization and usage optimization. So rate optimization are things like enterprise discounts, private rate cards, reservations, reserved instances, savings plans, committed usage discounts, those kind of things. And then the usage optimization, while we can surface it centrally. It has to be done decentralized by the engineering teams. And so this is what I want to emphasize in this call. Rate optimization can almost exclusively be done centrally by just one person or a small team, right? For example, if you need renegotiating a very large contract with a large cloud vendor, you may want a couple of people to help you with that, maybe someone from finance and so forth, right? But it's essentially a very small group of people that can do that. However, usage optimization are things like right sizing, re-architecting, cloud parking, using more cloud native services, going to like serverless and those kind of things, right? The recommendations can be surfaced centrally, but the execution or the deliverable of those recommendations has to be done decentralized with the engineering teams. So each engineer is most familiar with the workloads, right? And they have intimate knowledge about it. I'm just one FinOps person, and there's 2,500 engineers or 3,500 engineers. So over time, I will build more knowledge, but ultimately, I can't have that detailed knowledge with each individual in the engineering team, what their workloads look like, how they're spiking, what their needs are for batch processing, and so forth. So we do need the help of engineers to step in and look at those recommendations and act upon them.
Yes, that sounds easy, Dieter, or you make it sound easy, right? So can you explain to us then engineers and their accountability? All right, because we're talking about rate optimization and cost optimization. So before optimization, what about visibility first, right? Because you need to see what you're optimizing. So what's your take on this? Where to start? Mhm.
Yeah, cost visibility in the cloud is the first thing that you do in your cloud FinOps journey, right? Ideally, you want near real-time cost visibility, because when an engineer starts an experiment and the experiment is live, they want to go and look at how did the experiment perform, right? How much did it cost? What is the latency? What is the customer experience, right? What are all those parameters? So cloud cost should be made available to engineers in near real time. Now, to be able to have cloud cost in any useful manner, because let's say you have an account or a subscription or a project on the GCP side, there may be multiple workloads running in this, right? You may have a mobile front end, you may have a database in the back end, you may have some software in the middle that does something, right, that gives you a competitive advantage. So for these kinds of situations, you need tagging or labeling on the, depending if it's in a containerized workload, right? You need tagging to help you out so that you really can say, okay, this engineer started this workload, this is the new workload, this is different from the old one, and you want to see what the cost implications are of that workload. So it's not just important to have the visibility into the financial aspects of your cloud workload, but it's also important for anomaly detection, right? Ever so often it happens that an engineer does an experiment, they turn something on before it was supposed to be scheduled to be on, and there's now a cloud cost that we didn't anticipate, right? So for these cost anomaly detections, it's not really helpful when at the end of the month I tell you that you spent $80,000 over budget, right? All you can do then is just be sad. It's much more useful if an hour later you get an email that would be in a fully automated fashion, right? Saying like, hey, we saw a cost spike that will amount to $80,000 a month. Is that something that was intentional?
This is helpful, Dieter. Thank you very much. This is helpful. Why don't we dive into some of the important FinOps capabilities now? So I hear a lot about showbacks and chargebacks, okay? So people who may not be working with FinOps discipline for as long as you are, Dieter, people use it interchangeably. I know it's different. Can you spell it out for us? Chargebacks and showbacks.
Of course. So the tags that we mentioned or the labels that we mentioned earlier, right? They help with the cost attribution. So the very first, sort of like when you look at that from a crawl walk and run maturity perspective, right? And now to the FinOps Foundation is actually more and more using the pre-crawl. You don't do anything. How does this look like, right? So probably a showback is more of a crawl or walk maturity, where you show engineers, hey, this is how much you have spent, right? That then interconnects with budgets as well, right? Setting up a budget alert to let you know when your budget is in danger. Again, you don't want at the end of the month to get a notice, hey, I was 80,000 over. Now all I can do is just be sad about it and be hopeful for the next month. But let's say that your growth is so much steeper that an algorithm can determine that by the end of the month you will be 80,000 over, but it can determine that maybe 5 days into the month, right? So at that point, getting that budget alert is useful because now you can do something about it, right? Then chargebacks is again a different way of that accountability model, right? If each budget owner has a budget set and then the cloud cost is being charged back to them, they can then make the best decisions on how to proceed. Let's say they want to roll out a new feature, but they don't have budget for that, right? If we side by side show a waste dashboard with opportunities to reduce cloud cost, right? So now you have a new feature of, let's say, $80,000, but then you have a couple of waste reduction opportunities of 50,000, 20,000, 10,000. Now this person can make choices. They can say like, okay, if I want this feature and I want to stay within budget, assuming, then I have these savings opportunities here that I can act on and share with my engineers. And once we have the savings, we can then roll out the feature in parallel. So on one side it will go up, and on the other one it will go down, but your budget overall will be not harmed.
Sounds easy. Sounds easy to keep in mind. But Dieter, let me probe you on something, okay? Engineers, they are living with innovation, okay? They don't like to be disciplined, all right? I was an engineer early in my career. I know once you're on a project, right, you want to use all the resources possible and some more, okay? So where is this culture comes in place where, again, we want engineers to be innovative, but at the same time, to have that visibility and accountability in organization.
And I have to caution anyone that is becoming too procedural when it comes to doing things in the cloud, right? The strength of the cloud is that you can run experiments that were impossible in a data center, right? If I need to run a machine learning experiment that needs 100,000 cores for a couple of hours, that is extremely difficult to do in data centers, right? There are some known projects of protein folding where a data center has been built and then handed over from the protein folding company to the government, actually, to do some communications. So there are some precedents for that, but it's usually multi-year projects, right? We are looking at like 4 or 5 years for this entire thing, not 4 or 5 hours, right? So the strength of the cloud is not to help you save money. A lot of people get that perception wrong. When you compare apples to apples, in the cloud, someone else is carrying a pager, and they will be notified if there is an outage, right? That person needs to be paid, and that person is not within your company anymore, right? So cloud on average will have a little bit of a premium because someone else is doing that kind of work, right? Maintenance, patches, software updates, that kind of stuff. So the advantage of the cloud is really in that experimentation, to be able to do a machine learning experiment or something similar like that, right? 100,000 cores for a couple of hours. If it turns out that it works fine, then what you can do is you can think of how to productize that experiment, right? Maybe from 100,000 cores. That's actually a true example that we did at Intuit. We did a machine learning algorithm that on a receipt, it finds where the total value of the receipt is. And surprisingly, it's not always the last value on the bottom right, because when you buy raw materials like lumber or something like that, there's some taxes that follow that number. a breakdown of different taxes. So that machine learning algorithm, the first proof of concept, was tens of thousands of cores, something like 70,000 cores. But once we productized it, we brought it down to less than 900, like 880 cores, something like that, right? And that was much more manageable from a cost perspective. So engineers are highly encouraged to experiment, but that responsibility, that freedom comes with a responsibility, right? You also need to monitor your cost and make sure that you're not over. So, for example, when, in my experience, when an experiment is unsuccessful, the engineer will terminate that experiment as quickly as possible, right? They don't want anyone to see that. But when the experiment is successful, they keep it up and running for weeks on end and show it around to their friends so that their friends can take a look at it, right? Meanwhile, this thing is 100,000 cores and costs us like, $10,000 a day or something like that. And this is where that, freedom and responsibility paradigm comes back. It's also part of the Netflix culture book, by the way, right? That the engineers get that freedom, but it comes with the responsibility that you need to act responsible, right? And that is a common theme. So we don't want, under no circumstances, do we want engineers to open tickets to start a new workload in the cloud, right? Maybe for an architecture review, that's okay, but they can just go and experiment as much as they want, and we don't want to constrain that, because the outcome of those experiments, and I see a lot of new stuff that is possible in the cloud, like bots, chatbots, and similar things that are very useful, that building this technology in the data center, it would be just a headache, and in the cloud, it's just a few mouse clicks and you're done, right? So under no circumstances do we want guardrails, right? These guardrails, if an engineer steps over, it either lets them know, a notification, right? You just started a service that is $5,000 an hour. Are you sure you wanted to do that, right? Or we push them back from the guardrail. So it's a little bit like a rubber band, right? That the engineer runs into it, but we push them back and said, like, you just started a virtual machine in the cloud that is $5 per hour. Usually the price is in single-digit cents, right? So we terminated that instance, and here's why. Here's a link to a Confluence page that explains how to do that properly. And if you did that intentionally, here's the steps that you can follow to do that. So we want those guardrails in place to let the engineers go on a paved road, but we don't want them to get hurt or them to hurt the company.
Exactly, to hurt themselves without even realizing it. Those cloud
Exactly.
cost mounts. Yeah, I know a lot of stories and anecdotes over there. Dieter, maybe you can feed us with some of those, where again, bad things happen. And it's unintentional, but at the same time, you cannot stop innovating. So, Dieter, maybe some of the examples from your work life of good stuff happening and maybe not so good stuff.
Yes, I'm very happy to share. So I don't want to go into specifics at which company this was, but we sometimes have interns, right? So we had the situation where an intern was told to go boil the ocean. They did an elastic MapReduce thing that was just phenomenally large. And unfortunately, the intern already knew how to do that. So they started a workload that was several $10,000 a day, and we caught it within a couple of hours. Then we used cost attribution to find out in which team that workload was started, right, created. And then we reached out to that manager, and the manager initially didn't know what was going on, and then he remembered, hey, I told this intern to go and boil the ocean. Maybe he knows how to do that. And so we took a look, and within essentially 24 hours, we were able to turn that off and bring that back in, right? So those things happen all the time, and I think that's okay, right? You want those kind of situations. Another situation is, let's say, you do for blob storage or Amazon's simple storage service, you want to do a data lifecycle policy that takes older objects and moves them to colder storage options, right? Because colder storage options are cheaper. So that is actually something that happened just recently. You can look at that on my LinkedIn feed, right? Where the engineer went and turned this on. Everything that's older than 12 months gets moved to colder storage. Well, the problem is that you need some education too, right? You need to train the engineers. They need to know the effect of their actions. In this specific case, they were using two separate AWS products. And if you transition data between two separate products, there's a transition fee. In this case, the transition fee was 3 cents per 1,000 objects. The engineer moved 3.3 billion objects. So that comes out to be $80,000, right? And so you need to not only be allowed to experiment, but there is also a training component, right? From my perspective, what I have seen most useful is to get certified, right? This is why I'm a certified cloud financial FinOps practitioner, and get certified because the certification will ensure that you have a minimum set of knowledge, right? And it will give you enough training that you may not know the answer to the question that you're looking for. However, you will have enough knowledge that you will know that you have to research that. Right? You can't just go and turn something on because there may be unknown side effects, right? So you will have at least that knowledge and be able to act responsibly and do the right things for yourself and the company.
Yeah, good point, Dieter. Knowledge is power, right? So the more and more FinOps discipline becomes, more and more people aware of it, right? The certification, the need for that education, will rise. And that will help because it's not about the tool, it's about who's using the tool. How about that? So yeah, good point. Now let's go back a little bit maybe to forecasting, because I know it's important, right? It's important capability. And again, it's finance and engineers work together to forecast cloud spend, right? So they have a benchmark. How does it work?
So forecasting, again, there's different methods, right? Between crawl, walk, and run. Run, of course, may be a fully automated one. That's what we are doing at my current employer, that the forecast essentially runs every day at 6:30 p.m. If there's new input data, like new projects, right? There's no machine learning algorithm that can detect that you are going in 3 months to start providing a service in a new country, right? There is no machine learning algorithm that is capable of telling me that 6 months from now, we are going to launch a new product, right? It simply doesn't know. So those things need to be entered by engineers. And the way we do that is we use cloud calculators, cost calculators, right? Every cloud has AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle. Every cloud has these cost calculators where you can in detail build a bill of materials, right? I need this many VMs. I need this many databases. I need this much data transfer. I need this much blob storage, and so forth, right? Once you have that bill of material compiled, the calculator will actually give you a cost. And that cost number then for each month, because maybe you have a ramp up phase, then you have a steady phase, and if the service is only temporary, you will have a ramp down phase. So you need to model this over the months and literally provide these numbers to the forecasting system so that the forecasting system can layer this in, right? Now, you mentioned that forecasting is important, and I want to go into a little bit more detail why it is so important. If you're over forecasting, so the forecasted number is more than your actual spend, that difference your company was not able to use during that time period, let's say 12 months, right? So if you're off by like $5 million, that $5 million could have been used for other innovation, some projects, marketing, sales campaigns, whatever. But that never happened because you forecasted too much. If you forecast under actuals, right? So your forecast is lower than the actuals are over forecast. What happens is that this money has to come from somewhere, right? So when you look at typical revenue spend of companies like Apple, Amazon, Meta, those kind of companies, about half is spent on headcount. About a third is spent on physical operations like offices, physical security, janitorial, cafeteria, landscaping, that kind of thing. Then there's a relatively small sliver, maybe a sixth or so, that is sales, if the company has sales. And then you're left with a very small portion underneath that is maybe about 1/6. And that is what powers the innovation for everything on this planet, right? Unless maybe you're NASA and you get just a government money, right? And don't have to worry about that. But so that little sliver there is where the innovation happens, and usually the cloud spend isn't that as well, right? So if you actuals come over what you forecasted, what happens is that projects have to be that were in flight, right? They have to be put on hold. So let's say you had a sales campaign, and the sales campaign, a marketing campaign, and the marketing comes up with, maybe the first 3 months is a product introduction. They show you how to use the product, right? How to click on things or do stuff with the product. Now, after that ramp up period, there's maybe a brand building period of another 6 months, right? During which you show the product, everyone already knows how to use it, and you just bring up the brand logo, right? And you say something like, that's auto, you have a catchphrase, right? And that tells you, okay, this is now associated with the brand. And then you may have a ramp down period. If you pick a wrong spot during that time period to end your campaign or project or whatever effort you had, the lead to that may be a complete loss to the company. So again, we are looking at potentially several $1 million that you spent on something that has no effect.
Dieter, what about some pitfalls? Okay, can we maybe touch on some of the common mistakes? Because it looks like, the excitement about FinOps is growing, but what are the common challenges you want to warn people about?
And I want to bring it back to engineers, right? What are the common challenges for engineers? And it is, again, understanding visibility into cloud cost, right? That's sort of like a very fundamental, basic, foundational capability, right? Understanding how savings instruments apply to your cloud cost, when they apply, when do discounts apply, so that you can read your dollar number correctly, right? Then when it comes with innovation, knowing what the cost is, knowing what your budget is, having just general awareness around those things, right? Looking at cost anomalies, right? When someone comes to you and says like, hey, you have some usage that wasn't there before, take that seriously, right? Don't say like, oh, you know what, I have my projects going on, I have my deliverables, I have my roadmap, I don't have time for this, right? Because if you are spending like $10,000 a day, that's going to be $300,000 at the end of the month, right? That is about how much your role compensation-wise costs, right? So be aware of that, right? Pitfalls when it comes to doing cost savings in the cloud, make sure you socialize your ideas, right? Come to me, tell me, hey, I'm about to do XYZ, right? That happens to me every day. And I'm glad about that, right? Come to me, ask me if this is a good idea. It might not be, it might be a fantastic idea, right? But we need to make sure you don't want to just do something without double checking, right? If there is a FinOps practice already established at your company, you're in good shape, then the effect will be that maybe portions of a sprint or entire sprints may be dedicated to usage optimization, however that looks like. Could be cloud parking, re-architecting, right-sizing, moving things to cheaper services, those kind of things, right? If you don't have that practice established yet, talk to your manager about that, right? Because your manager may or may not have an appetite to act upon it, right? If your manager does have an appetite, in my experience, it needs to come top down, right? The executives need to support FinOps. They need to allow for enough time, maybe 5%, 10%, or they just say, hey, you know what, this month, dedicated sprint. Or we have a FinOps hackathon, right? That's what we're doing at Roku, right? We just do hackathons, and we go, and every engineer is like looking for stuff. Very busy times for me with a lot of questions, right? So there's lots of different things of how you can get involved in FinOps and can make a significant contribution in the cloud FinOps space.
What about some gamification, Dieter? Do
I
people do
love that.
that? I mean, any kind of award system, any kind of competitive angle to this? Have you
Yes,
seen this? Yeah.
at Intuit, what we did is we built a waste dashboard. So
Mhm.
it basically calculates, this is your current cost. This is how the optimized cost would look like. Again, you get a difference, right? This is your current cost, this is your optimized cost. And the difference between the two, that's your waste. And we display that dollar value on the dashboard and we sort it by the highest dollar value on top. If you and that is very useful, right? But one of the first things that you will notice is people will ask for exceptions to be implemented, so that you can ask for, hey, I have this workload. This is a legacy application. Maybe it's running still on Windows servers or something like that, right? Over the next 2 years, we don't have any plans of changing that. This is just something that we have to do, right? So in my experience, that was the first thing, the first feature enhancement of that waste dashboard is to have an exception process to that. Another thing with the waste dashboard that you will see is that your perception of waste will broaden. Maybe you start with, we call them waste sensors. So maybe you start with like 6 big waste sensors, right? But then once you make some progress on that, maybe you add another 6, right? Or another 12. There is in the FinOps Foundation GitHub repository, I think there's something like 50 waste sensors, right? So as you grow over time, as you mature from crawl, walk, run, right, you will add those waste sensors, which also means that the dollar values, the bar will rise, right, over time. Maybe your waste was $20,000 in the beginning, and now it increased to 40,000 or maybe to 80,000, right? So the bar will rise, and you need to communicate that to your engineering leaders, right? You need to say like, yes, it is increasing because we are adding more visibility into this area. It's like, having a stack of papers and you take a couple papers off, there's more papers underneath it, right? You now have more visibility. That's how that works.
Thank you, Dieter. Thank you so very much. Time is flying. We're a little bit over time, so appreciate everybody who is staying with us. Please share a link to this event because it stays recorded. All right, we'll make sure that more audience will see the fantastic insights and hear wonderful experiences from Dieter. So please share with your networks, with your peers, because again, we are just at the beginning of the journey. FinOps is really, right, the importance of discipline is rising. Next year it will be only bigger. Dieter, in conclusion, please, right? Few takeaways. You mentioned so many important insights for engineers, for finance, for pretty much everyone in an organization. Any takeaways to send our audience with?
Yeah, so if you're an engineer and you want to get more involved in FinOps, right, take a look at the FinOps book, right? That's certainly helpful. There's going to be a new version of the FinOps book released, I believe, either next January or February. It's supposed to be January, but we are running late at the moment. So that will have something like 8 more chapters and I believe 150 more pages. So if you can wait a little bit until that book comes out, it's definitely very useful, right? Then look at a Cloud FinOps practitioner certification. If you try to take the certification cold, it will be difficult. I helped to build the questions, and you really need to at least read the book or attend the class. It's a 2-day class. It's like 5 hours a day or something like that, right? If you attend the in-person class, which is unfortunately a little bit more expensive, you will have an extremely good chance of passing your exam on the first attempt, right? And generally, become a FinOps practitioner, sign up with the FinOps Foundation, and go into their Slack channels, right? It's very extensive conversations that are happening, a lot of learnings that you can get for absolutely free without anything, right? And get more knowledgeable in that area. So that is my recommendation to you.
Thank you, Dieter, so very much. Thank you. I appreciate your time today. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me.